I'm Kyra Kiles, Vice President of Digital Editorial for Johnson Publishing Company. So I run ebony.com and jetmag.com.
Hi, I'm Gil Robertson, President of the African American Film Critics Association.
Welcome to the latest edition of our Fast Forward series, where we talk about how to colorize TV and film. Today's conversation is with a group that we like to call the reps, the lawyers, the agents, and the studio executives. Listen in on our discussion and then make sure to join the conversation with hashtag FastForward on social media.
So what can be done to make film companies understand that diversity is good business?
It's a more nuanced or complicated answer that I'll go into. It has a lot to do with international. Films starring predominantly African American or Black or people of color casts, the P&L and the profit are immediately taken down when it comes to international. And as international becomes more and more a factor in the revenues of a studio, that determines what your budget is, what your greenlight budget is. Not to get too technical, but your greenlight budget is determined by how much revenue they think they can make off a film. So if films starring people that look like us, automatically the international box office is lopped off, that greenlight process is a lot harder. And that is my frustration as a producer when I go into studios trying to get a film greenlit. They take my international down immediately, no matter who's in it, unless it's Denzel or Will. So it makes it, therefore, much more difficult. It also affects the way actors are paid, the way directors are paid, what the budget for the film ultimately is. Doesn't necessarily mean the film does not get greenlit, it just gets greenlit at a lower level because they're not depending on that international box office to help. So we are already starting at a disadvantage when it comes to certain projects.
Well, let me ask you this. In some cases, the audience may believe that's a chicken or egg situation, that perhaps the reason why these global audiences aren't accustomed to going toward Black-led films is because they don't see them, and then we're not seeing them because people are saying that audiences won't go see Black-led films. So how do you break that vicious cycle? Is there a way to break that cycle?
I think there definitely is. It's a harder proposition for studios to invest in, say, one or two actors that they feel have the opportunity to be global successes. For example, in the previous profession I was in, the music business, I saw firsthand how our culture travels the world and how it impacts people in every territory. But the problem is, or the difference in the music business is that record labels are investing in an artist over multiple albums. They have that artist for 6, 7 albums. So they are going to see a return on their investment by sending artists to territories and working the different global markets. A film, you've got one shot. It's kind of like an excuse that they use. It's an unspoken excuse.
That's what I was trying to get at. Is that an excuse?
I think also, if I could just jump in on that
Absolutely.
one, you know, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
If you say that the films don't travel overseas, and then therefore you don't take them overseas, how can they perform overseas? And so it's the cyclical, you know, the cyclical self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, we were at a conference, the three of us, this past year, where we talked about the success of what I believe was Straight Outta Compton. And we talked about the success, and it was Universal Studios executive talking about the success of Fast and Furious. You can't get a more diverse cast than Fast and Furious. And in that situation with Straight Outta Compton, you know, one could say, oh, well, you know, while our music travels overseas, our films don't. And again, it takes that executive, it takes that studio, it takes that head of marketing to say, well, we're going to go ahead, we're going to make a budget, we're going to create a budget, and we're going to play it, and we're going to see how it does. Because if you don't create a budget for an international marketing play, it's not going to perform. And in fact, a budget was provided. The movie did well. You probably could speak a lot better to it than I, but it's going to take that kind of change of thought process and that kind of change of thinking to make a change, ultimately.
And that comes with, the bigger issue is having diverse folks in the room making the decisions. That's another issue at the studio level that has not been addressed. Oscar's so white and the controversy behind the nominations this year, but that's the caboose. The engine is at the agency and at the studio level in those boardrooms making those decisions. So if you don't have a diverse cast of folks, or at least one or two in that room that could speak to that culture, that could speak knowledgeably to the artists that are creating this content and that are starring in it, the decisions are being made in a vacuum or just based on research alone, not feeling.
Nina?
I absolutely agree with everything that's been said, but I also think there's another level at which, because so much of the work I do isn't with movies and television that have predominantly cast of color. And one of the things that I think where an opportunity is missed is that there really has to be much more diverse casting in projects that are not predominantly about or featuring people of color, because there really is this point at which the audience becomes acclimated to certain types of faces and certain actors. And you see actors like, for example, Chiwetel Ejiofor. The non-white audience may know him more from 12 Years a Slave, but the truth is that if you're a moviegoer, he has appeared over the years in a series of movies which have had very, very diverse casts. And as a result, he has a growing value in the worldwide marketplace, and that is just a step at a time. So I think one of the things that needs to happen is that people need to be educated to the fact that you can have, in a non-predominantly African American or Latino or person of color movie, a diverse cast. You will still have good box office results, but you start to build an awareness among your foreign audience as to certain types of individuals, certain individuals who they start to perceive as stars. Because the truth of it is that Will and Denzel actually went through a very similar process. They were in a number of movies over the course of their careers that ultimately led to them being big stars.
Right.
Who sell overseas.
Right. Deborah?
From what I see and the celebrities that we're constantly seeing over and over again, only because it feels like these are the only ones that are embraced by the studios. Right. And for me, in TV, it's like we need to help identify who those next people are, so that their faces do get out there, so we put them on TV and in movies and things like that a little more often. But I just kind of feel like we're kind of stifled with, there are only Denzel, or there's only Will Smith, and only Halle Berry are getting the roles. I mean, unless we're out to create our own, which is difficult because that goes back to who's in the room and who's greenlighting the next. It's complicated for me to reach out to the next group of actors, because they haven't been recognized as the big star yet, that type of thing. So
one of the things that we note is that, like all other areas of Hollywood, we could definitely use a tanning, so to speak, there. How do you feel that the industry is doing in that regard?
I mean, I believe it's getting better. I'll say it's getting better, but it's so slow. It just feels like we're standing in line waiting to be identified, waiting for our turn type of thing, instead of we're going to have to go out and make our own, which is what social media has become more about.
In terms of growth, change, progress, future, I think there's definitely been progress. To your point, there can certainly be much more. But for me as a talent agent, sitting in talent and casting rooms, being able to talk about what's casting around town, whether it be at a studio, whether it be for films or for television, and actually hearing conversations saying it's open casting. They're looking at all ethnicities. It could be African American, Latino, it could be Asian, it could be white, and to actually have clients going in, and when they come and call me after the audition and say, wait, which role were they casting today? Because I saw everybody. You know, I saw people that looked like every walk of life in there. That to me is progress. That to me, I think, is the direction that we want to go in, assuming that there is a reality behind it. Because what I've also seen is the description may call for an open ethnicity, and then 9.5 times out of 10, they end up casting a Caucasian actor. But I do think that conversation, that dialogue, that openness is much more there now in the last 2 years, especially when you look at the success of television, whether you look at Shonda Rhimes' empire with Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, you look at Blackish, you look at everything that's happening with cable right now, and some of the other outlets. So I think that there's definitely more, and I feel like we're going in a good direction, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. More so on the film side, because that's where it's really lacking.
Yeah, I think so. But television has changed. I mean, I don't know if most people realize it, but 3-4 years ago, Taraji P. Henson and Viola Davis were not acceptable as lead casting in a television series.
That's a great point. Yeah.
They were absolutely not. I can remember specific television series they were turned down for in favor of Halle Berry, Queen Latifah, people of that ilk. So there has been a slow progress, but it's very slow. But you know how much the casting business has changed. You know, there was a time when the casting business was very, very personal. And when you had casting agents who really dug in and they knew the New York theater community, and they absolutely made careers. When you look at a movie like The Godfather, where you were casting really a bunch of young, unknown actors for the most part, that's a much tougher thing to happen now. First of all, casting has become much more institutionalized. People put themselves on tape. They don't necessarily come into a room. It means you get to see a wider group of people, but it also means that there are more people involved in the process of initially culling out who gets seen and not seen. And I'm sure that influences who ultimately makes it to the screen.